This is BBC World News. I'm Matthew Amreliwala. Our top story. Myanmar's generals are accused by the United Nations rapporteur of murdering and torturing their opponents. It comes on the day another 7 pro-democracy protesters are killed in Myanmar. Within the last hour, the UN investigator has called for sanctions over serious crimes.
There is growing evidence that this same Myanmar military, led by the same senior leadership, is now engaging in crimes against humanity.
Also ahead, we look at how life has changed in the year since the COVID pandemic was declared. Meanwhile, several European countries put a temporary ban on using the AstraZeneca COVID jab to investigate claims of serious side effects. And in his first comment since Harry and Meghan's bombshell interview, Prince William insists the British royal family is not racist.
Have you spoken to your brother since the interview?
No, I haven't spoken yet, but I will do.
And can you just let me know, is the royal family a racist family, sir?
No, we're very much not a racist family.
Hello and welcome to BBC World News. Let's start with that breaking news regarding Myanmar, where the UN's rapporteur on human rights has accused the generals of possibly committing crimes against humanity as they take forceful action against people protesting against their coup. It all has come in the last hour or so, and it's a striking assessment of the situation. I'll play you those comments in a moment, but let me just show you some of the pictures that have come in through the course of the day. This from some of the southern cities where again protesters have been on the streets again. They've been met with a brutal crackdown with the firing of tear gas and rubber bullets. Elsewhere in Myanmar, we've seen a further 7 people killed as live ammunition again being used. And all of that, of course, going on whilst thousands of people have been arrested. Another really disturbing day there on the streets in Myanmar. And it's led to this assessment from the UN rapporteur.
Since the coup, the Myanmar military has attacked and forcibly displaced several thousand members of ethnic nationalities from their homes. It should come as little surprise that there is growing evidence that this same Myanmar military, led by the same senior leadership, is now engaging in crimes against humanity, including the acts of murder, enforced disappearance, persecution, torture, and imprisonment in violation of fundamental rules of international law. Of course, a full investigation and a trial before a court of law are required to formally find crimes against humanity. And I know that the independent investigative mechanism for Myanmar is collecting evidence on this point right now. But I implore all of you to look at the facts available in light of international legal precedent finding crimes against humanity.
Well, the clearest of comments there from Thomas Andrews. He went on to call for sanctions against the country's military leaders and against the Myanmar oil and gas enterprise, which is owned by the army. Have a listen.
The people of Myanmar need not only words of support, but supportive action. They need the help of the international community, and they need it now. The Nonviolent Civil Disobedience Movement, or CDM, is effective and growing, drawing its organic power from the unflinching commitment of the Myanmar people. Myanmar has never appeared to be more unified, but they need our help, and they need it now.
Well, responding to the rapporteur, a spokesman for Myanmar's military junta said the army had intervened because they'd found evidence of vote rigging in last year's elections, and went on to describe the fact that they had used, quote, utmost restraint so far dealing with the violent protests.
In the recent days, authorities concerned have been paying attention to maintaining law and order in the country. Authorities have been exercising utmost restraint to deal with the violent protests. Since 8 February, the authorities imposed Section 144 of the Criminal Procedure, which prohibits gathering of 5 or more people in public places in 146 townships, where violent protests and riots have created disturbances to the public order and the rule of law.
Well, that was the response from the military regime. Earlier in the day, we'd had a report from Amnesty International. They are really concerned about what they were describing as the battlefield tactics we've been seeing over the last 6 weeks or so in Myanmar. Kaylee Long is a researcher for Amnesty behind that report, and she spoke to us earlier about the findings.
Amnesty International's evidence lab analysed these videos. So they looked at over 50 clips, and when they look at things like that, they're looking to see if they can geolocate. They're looking to identify weapons, potentially the units that the perpetrators belong to, looking for multiple angles on the same incident so that we can verify, and also looking at photographs. So it's really looking at whatever it is that we can get our hands on and seeing how we can piece together a clearer idea of what's going on and try and see if there are any patterns we can glean. Certainly from the 28th of February, it seemed there was some sort of inflection point. We started seeing a dramatic increase in the number of people being killed, which raises the question about the potential issuing of shoot-to-kill orders. It's a horrific situation, and the footage that's emerging from there every day gives you an idea of just a fraction of what's going on, really. It's certainly difficult to keep up with. Beyond the urban centres, where we're seeing these violent crackdowns on peaceful protesters, in the ethnic minority states, we're very concerned about the potential for resumption of conflict there, as well as the large vulnerable population of internally displaced people. There's over 300,000 people who we hope there will be humanitarian access for. So it's a full-blown crisis in every part of the country, really. Amnesty International, we've said, time and time again, that the reason we're in this situation today is the result of a failure to hold the Myanmar military to account for its past atrocities and crimes under international law. So what we need to see is strong, decisive action from the international community, whether that's with a strong resolution out of the Human Rights Council, but also for the Security Council to pass a comprehensive global arms embargo, as well as referring the situation in Myanmar as a whole to the ICC. And what will be, that requires Myanmar's allies to stop shielding them in the ICC.
Well, that's the latest from Amnesty in terms of their report today. One more line to report in terms of what has been happening in Myanmar, because the military government has earlier today accused Aung San Suu Kyi, the deposed leader, of accepting an illegal payment of $600,000 in a new charge levelled against the overthrown leader. And that, of course, has been condemned. The charges against her over the last few weeks as trumped up charges by the international community that continue to demand her release. So those are all the latest lines on Myanmar. Clearly that story is moving. It is our main story here. So we'll keep an eye on that and bring you any more developments as they come into us. Now, it is exactly 1 year since the World Health Organization officially declared the coronavirus outbreak a global pandemic. COVID-19 has so far claimed more than 2.5 million lives, but there is hope on the horizon as vaccines reach some of the furthest corners of the world. And earlier this afternoon, the European Union has approved a fourth vaccine, the single-dose Johnson & Johnson jab. Here's our global health correspondent, Naomi Grimley.
It's been a year that most of us will remember for the rest of our lives. One of grief and loneliness on a scale none of us could have imagined. It's exactly 12 months since the World Health Organization officially sounded the alarm about the seriousness of COVID-19.
We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
And yet, after a whirlwind of scientific discoveries, we're now seeing vaccines being distributed to some of the most remote communities on Earth. In Brazil, they've mounted a vaccination campaign reaching reservations and villages, like this one deep in the Amazon jungle.
I'm happy. We are grateful for the vaccination, so we will not catch the disease and my people will get better.
Because of a new variant spreading there, Brazil has seen some of the worst death toll figures since the pandemic began in the last few days. But overall, scientists are positive about bringing the pandemic to an end.
We're in a much more powerful situation because we understand so much more about the virus now. So I am very optimistic of the future. I think we have a better handle on the virus, and we're able to keep up, I suppose, with the race against an evolving virus.
This graph shows some of the differences in pace, however, of vaccination rates globally. Chile, Israel and the US have powered ahead. Faring less well are Brazil, Russia and China. In Europe, there's been a huge amount of disquiet over disappointing vaccination rates. The situation in France has not been helped by negative remarks from President Macron about the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which he later retracted. This family doctor is doing his best to persuade reluctant patients.
There's always a hesitation, and we have to convince some patients. That's time and energy used. If we don't have support, both from government and media, it's hard to go up from there. Patients trust us, but only to a certain extent.
Meanwhile, the international COVAX programme says it's delivered over 20 million doses to more than 20 developing countries, mostly in Africa. But it's really only enough to vaccinate key medical workers. Whether it's drive-through vaccinations in LA or doctors and nurses in Nigeria, get ready for an increasingly divided world, depending on who's been vaccinated and who hasn't. With over 2.6 million deaths in the pandemic so far, everyone can agree that much better protections are needed to ensure it never happens again. Naomi Grimley, BBC News.
Well, a look back there at the last 12 months. Meanwhile, the EU today has approved the Johnson & Johnson single-dose vaccine for use, making it the fourth vaccine given the green light for use in the bloc. Our health correspondent, Michelle Roberts, has been telling me more.
It will take a little bit of time, a few weeks, to get those first doses in. It is a one-off shot, so the other ones that are currently being used, you need 2 doses to get the full protection. This one you can give once and you're done, it makes it very convenient. It can also be stored in a fridge. It doesn't have the sort of complicated distribution problems that some of the other ones have had. So it's really positive news.
I'll talk in a moment about supplies, because that is a separate issue with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Also, we already know about the AstraZeneca, the way the EU has approached that. But in terms of developments with the AstraZeneca jab, there have been developments today. Just talk us through that.
So some European countries, around 7, have paused some of the vaccination with AstraZeneca. Now, this is just a precaution. They've done it because there were a few cases of clotting problems seen in some people who had recently received the vaccine. Now, that may sound worrying, but this is just a precaution. They don't think that the vaccine actually caused this. They just want to run extra checks and be super, super cautious. But so far, it's all looking good. The company itself has been doing some tests again on the batches that were used. They're happy with that. The European regulator says it's not overly concerned. It just wants to go through the right checks and measures, because with any new treatment, you want to be 100% sure that it's doing what it's meant to be.
Now back to supplies, because we know the EU has been criticised for the slow rollout, that tussle with AstraZeneca. In terms of this development with Johnson & Johnson, so they've had final approval now. In terms of the actual supplies, when are they likely to actually come?
So the EU has ordered 200 million doses, but it's not going to get all of those quickly. It's hoping to get 55 million from April onwards, but there are still some concerns that they may not get those doses quickly enough. I mean, we've heard repeatedly that the vaccination programme in general has been a bit slower, a bit more sluggish in Europe compared to some other countries. We've also heard about vaccine nationalism, where there's a concern that different nations are protecting their own stock and not sharing as much as they could be. We don't have details on the individual contracts with different manufacturers, so it's very hard to unpick whether they are delivering what has been agreed, but it's certainly a very contentious issue that will keep rolling.
Michelle Roberts. Now let's turn to some of the day's other main stories here. A fire at a clothing factory in Egypt has killed at least 20 people. Reports still coming in say another 24 were injured. 12 fire engines dealt with the blaze on the eastern outskirts of Cairo. It's not clear what caused the fire. Scientists say they're a step closer to developing a potentially game-changing test to diagnose Parkinson's disease based on compounds found on the surface of the skin. The findings offer hope that a new test could be developed through a simple, painless skin swab. And hundreds of climbers are poised to return to Mount Everest for the first time since the pandemic shut down Nepal's mountaineering sector for a year. Officials there expect more than 300 to make an attempt on the peak, slightly down on the spring season from 2 years ago. People across Japan have been remembering the 20,000 people who lost their lives in the devastating earthquake and tsunami 10 years ago. It was the worst natural disaster in the country's living memory. A powerful earthquake, deadly tsunami, and then a nuclear meltdown. Now, do stay with us on BBC World News, because still to come here on the programme, asking questions and telling global stories for 30 years. Join us as we celebrate 3 decades of BBC World News.
Of all the companies on the Fortune 500 in the year 2000, more than half no longer exist. Digital transformation isn't just a good idea, it's a matter of corporate survival. Enterprise AI enables organizations to use artificial intelligence at enterprise scale, solving previously unsolvable business problems to help you not just survive, but thrive. C3.ai. This is Enterprise AI.
Welcome to a journey you've never imagined. Welcome to Arabia, Saudi.
In our connected world, all news is international. So with in-depth analysis,
I will be a president for all Americans.
And correspondents covering both home and global events, get a deeper understanding and find out what is really going on.
World News America on BBC World News.
Welcome back to BBC World News. Let's turn to our main headlines. 7 people have been killed in Myanmar within the last hour. A United Nations investigator has called for sanctions over possible crimes against humanity. It's exactly a year since the coronavirus pandemic was officially declared. In the last hour, the European Union has approved a single-shot vaccine from Johnson & Johnson. Now, Prince William has insisted the royal family is not racist in his first comments since the Duke and Duchess of Sussex told US television that a member of the family had questioned what colour their child's skin would be. Prince William also revealed he hasn't spoken to his brother since Harry and Meghan gave that interview to Oprah Winfrey, but he said he would do so. He was asked the question as he visited a school. Have a look at this.
Sir, have you spoken to your brother since the interview?
No, I haven't spoken yet, but I will do.
And can you just let me know, is the royal family a racist family, sir?
No, we're very much not a racist family.
Prince William a little earlier in the day. Now, 30 years ago, things changed for viewers of global television when the first edition of BBC World Service News was broadcast. We're now known as BBC World News, but we are still very much at your service. Well, lots has happened along the way, some of it shocking, some of it a bit surprising. One of the long-standing and much admired presenter, David Eads, has been taking a look back at the history of this channel.
Good evening, this is the BBC World Service News. I'm Ed Mitchell. The headlines tonight.
The 11th of March 1991, the day the BBC took the plunge into international TV news. And what a year it turned out to be. The dissolution of the Soviet Union, the first Gulf War, the start of the Balkan conflict, not to mention IRA attacks here in London, the very first website created, and the Nobel Peace Prize, well, that went to the pro-democracy activist Aung San Suu Kyi. And that was just the start.
Tonight, the Gorbachev era has at last come to an end.
I, Nelson Mandela,
Every day of every year, we've shone a light on our world, on your world.
Is faithful to the Republic of South Africa.
Highlighting events for the better and for the worse. Events which fundamentally changed our world. We've grown up with leaders like these.
Where are you from?
BBC.
Here's another beauty.
It's a good line.
We've held them to account.
Но я журналист, я задаю вопрос. Вы отвечаете.
Хорошо, ладно. Я приношу вам свои извинения.
I'm Matthew Amariwala as the United States prepares for a new president.
We've broken the big stories.
Information disorder. Who can you trust?
Sought out the truths behind them.
With nearly 200,000 people now displaced by the fighting in South Sudan.
Brought our own insights to bear. And while our values are permanent, our style has changed.
And these latest pictures give you an idea of the scale of what's happening.
BBC World News tells more of your stories through your eyes. Images witnessed and shared by you, delivered within moments to a global audience.
We begin a long goodbye from our home for the last 2 decades here at Television Centre.
And don't forget the transition to our new premises with new technology, new cameras, some with a mind of their own.
Oh, hello. Well, you've gone. Oh, Tanya, always a pleasure to have you.
Pardon me. One-off moments that only live TV news can deliver and we can never forget. 30 years protecting and enhancing the finest reputation for impartiality.
The police do not have this demonstration under control.
Trust.
Sao Paulo residents have been in quarantine for nearly 2 months now.
And truth.
Accusing the foreigners, including foreign media, of conspiring against Egypt. So we have to leave. It's getting violent.
That is where we have not changed.
There's this extraordinary effort to stop us documenting any of it.
You know, every year throws up unique challenges, none more so than this COVID year. But throughout the 90s, the noughties, the teensies and the 20s, BBC World News has been telling it like it is. So on our big birthday, from us to you, happy 30th.
Lovely look back, and we'll have more on that in the coming hour. I want to return, though, now to our main story, what we've heard from the UN rapporteur, Thomas Andrews, who has described Myanmar being controlled by a murderous, illegal regime. Let me speak now to Kelly Currie, a former diplomat for the US State Department on Myanmar policy and formed part of the US mission to the UN during the Rakhine State crisis. Thank you so much for being here with me. I just gave you one of the lines from Tom Andrews in the last hour or so. Do you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely. This military regime is like previous Burmese military regimes, known for its sadistic, murderous streak, and they've proven themselves to be consistent on that point.
In terms of what we've been seeing, and we're going to put on screen some of the pictures from today, but it has been like this for days, and actually every day we've seen more and more brutality being used by the military in the crackdown. We have live fire, we have beatings, we have detentions. In your view, like Tom Andrews was saying, do you view all of those things or some of those things as basically crimes against humanity?
The Tatmadaw has been committing crimes against humanity for decades. And so what we're seeing on the streets of Yangon, Mandalay, and other cities and towns across Burma is of a piece with a history of committing crimes against humanity. This is a military that does not follow the laws of war. It does not respect the Geneva Conventions, and it doesn't respect its own citizens' rights to live free and at peace. This military has always committed crimes against humanity. Now we're seeing them play out on live TV in some cases, and from the video footage of those who are being directly affected in real time. That's really the major difference today.
So that is what is happening. That is the backdrop. No ifs, no buts. So very simply, what should actually be done?
Well, the UK is in a very special position to do something as the pin holder in the Security Council on Burma. They have a responsibility to move forward quickly with a Security Council resolution that actually puts an arms embargo and other targeted sanctions on the military.
Sorry to interrupt you. You've seen already what has happened at the UN Security Council. They couldn't even agree wording which mentioned military coup because of the way the dynamics work. There is no real hope of the sort of sanctions you are talking about or Tom Andrews is talking about, is there?
I disagree. I think that what needs to happen right now is that the U.S., the U.K., and others who believe that this is an illegal coup, that the military has gone beyond the bounds of any normal behavior and that this is a crisis of international peace and security, need to put China and Russia and other member states that are on the Security Council on the spot. Make them choose. The Chinese hate it when they're forced to make a decision. Right now, they would rather sit on the sidelines and wait and see who ends up on top and then deal with that government.
Kelly, I've only got 60 seconds. I've only got 60 seconds left, so I'm going to ask you a final question. We're reaching the 10th anniversary of the Syrian war. Do you see that there is a danger of history repeating itself, which is that the outside world is left watching with horror, absolutely unable to do anything about barbarity happening on the ground, played out every day?
Absolutely. There are lots of armed groups in Burma. There is the government's remit does not carry in certain parts of the country, and it's awash in small arms. This could quickly evolve into a very deadly and murderous situation far beyond the violence levels that we're seeing today.
Well, Kelly Curry, thank you so much for joining us, giving us your thoughts on that, our main story, that developing story on Myanmar. And back in half an hour's time, we'll have more on that news coming out of Myanmar and the UN's reaction. That's after Focus on Africa. See you later.